Hello again, everyone. We are pleased to continue our long-term partnership with the Boston Consulting Group. Every year, they bring insights to help us explore fresh frontiers in climate solutions. This year, I'm delighted to welcome Artur Ramos, Managing Director and Partner of BCG, to present the report.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sophia. It's a pleasure to be here again, speaking about our climate report as part of the knowledge partner of this conference. Amazing, this fourth edition. I think Luciana was very gentle, recognizing all the importance and impact of this group that's been working together. I think this is a good example of this word that everybody knows now, multirão. I think is a clear example that we have on this bringing this multirão together on this Brazil Climate Summit. So a big thank for everyone. I have also to say a big thank you for the BCG team that prepared this report. And I'd like to highlight Luisa Boechat, that should be here. I haven't seen her, but should be here as a key component of this team and how it was driven this report. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can seize the opportunity into a very specific market. I think it was mentioned on the two panels before, okay? Both in terms of the geopolitical side, international side, and also the agriculture potential that Brazil have on supplying biofuels. But how can we bring solutions to this segment, to this marine fuels, as we described, okay? We have been in the last years presenting several of the reports touching about most of the points, and on really trying to frame the discussion that we have on this Brazil as a climate hub, Brazil as climate solutions for the markets. Okay, so we have several of these reports around that we described before. This year, we're going to be talking specifically about this opportunity, and more than one detailed example. I think we like this framework here on the marine sector. Is really a hint on how it's possible to decarbonize a very interesting, intelligent mechanism here. So this is much more than the specific case. I think it's very important that this could provide a lot of solutions, a lot of important ideas how we move forward on that. First of all, we're going to be covering here what we call the hard-to-abate sectors. Okay. Typically, the hard-to-abate sectors are about a quarter of emissions. No? Not the other ones are easy to abate, but I think this is the way we talk about that. And particularly on the let's say, when we talk about that, we think about the industry side as the most important areas that we cover. But the key offender in hard-to-abate is in transportation. Okay. Of course, the trucking, the road transportation is the largest one, but also the shipping industry is just beside that is even larger than aviation. If shipping were a country, it would be the 6th largest emitter in the world. Okay, so this is very important. Just after Brazil. Okay, so it's just after Brazil in this discussion. What we have there on this framework, and why do like it's important? Okay, for the IMO, because it's an international jurisdiction. And I think the design of this framework relates to creating incentives, but penalties as well. Okay, so in both aspects, this also builds on a track record of the IMO that they were very successful in reducing the sulfur content of bunker fuels in the last few years. It was recently voted on its committee of environmental committee, so creating the framework for that discussion. And also, this is an important theme for the whole decarbonization in the world. We are talking about COP30. There is one item on the action agenda on COP30, the key objective number 2, talking about how to abate and talking about solutions exactly for this situation. So this is the discussion we have right now. This discussion was also led by Luciana and Paula, that's here now on our task force of finance for SB COP. We covered this. A lot of the things we're being here were built on that context. Okay. So let me describe a little bit of how it works. It seems very complicated, and it is, okay? So let's not be simplifying, okay? This is something, but basically the regulations that you have on the vertical axis, the carbon intensity of the fuels you are using, okay? And you have two lines there that sets a threshold, a tier 1 and tier 2 threshold, where you're gonna be, along the years, reducing, making more stringent throughout the time, okay? So in a very simplified way here, if you are in the green zone, this is the, just the animation here. If you're on the green zone, you basically has the opportunity to sell additional surplus, okay? So you're emitting less than the regulation of the framework here is starting, so you could sell to the other players here to compensate their emission. If you are on the yellow zone, on the middle of the two tier, you have to pay $100 per ton of CO2 equivalent on that, okay? So that's the middle zone. If you're on the red zone, you're above, you're non-compliant on that, you have to pay both for the $100 per ton of CO2 equivalent, but also pay the high penalty, that's 380. So it's a very intense, a very strong price incentive for you to get out of that red zone. The penalties collected will be part of a fund, and also the market balance around the price of the surplus units will be defined in the private negotiations around that. But we believe this is really a clear incentive and a clear model how we can do, and clearly stating throughout the time how you need to be productive and increase or reduce your own footprint. So basically, what's the need for Brazil? Okay, so this is, I think, the key aspects we are bringing here to the discussion. First, we do a kind of supply curve alternative we have. So how the bio discussion, the agriculture discussion related that we had here, we're taking into consideration and part of that. But we see that this, in the short to medium term, there's a very important opportunity of two consolidated value chains, okay, to achieving those objectives of reducing the impact on that sector. And that comes from ethanol and it comes from biodiesel, so the two important areas. There below, I think the one is very, there's cost-effective solutions in using LNG or bio-LNG here, as stated on the supply curve, but they're still not material. Okay, so this is something more for the medium term, something important. I think we heard about in the last panel about biomethane. So there are important opportunities here that can be covered, but it will take more time to be developed. And more on the long term, we are enthusiastic that there are potential related to the electrification, to low carbon hydrogen solutions that will lead to green ammonia, green methanol, synthetic fuels, but they will take time, okay, and they are very much expensive. The other aspect is that why is it important for Brazil? Brazil, the two charts there and I show you, is very important for seaborne trade. So there's the 50th largest country there, and also the largest supplier of feedstock that can be used for biofuels. And the third aspect, it was extensively discussed here in the previous two panels, is that we have availability of degraded land. So moving on that, and talking about this expression, and I was here listening to the conversation. It's very good that we're converging in terms of the numbers. Now we're using the numbers of 110. But I would like to emphasize very clear two messages here. Besides the production here, the potential to produce about 50 billion liters of biofuels, you can do that without deforesting, and you can do that without threatening food security. Okay, so very important to have those messages here. If you're talking about about 70% of the equivalent area for the area that we have today, use it as farmland in Brazil, can be part of recovery. That will roughly be something like Spain, Italy, and UK together. Okay, this is 110 million areas of degraded land that we have here on this chart. We're talking about a reforestation potential of 30 million. Okay, so this is one important aspect that we have here. The numbers are a little bit squeezed that on that area, but this will be equivalent to Italy, more or less. If we talk about that, that will be equivalent to Italy. And here we're concentrating on using 25 million hectares that will be oriented to farmland for biofuels potential. But as you mentioned here, and besides the increase in the productivity that will lead to additional supply of fuels, as Eduardo was mentioned, very important. The production of this, about 50 billion liters of ethanol from corn, from sugarcane, and also biodiesel from soy, they produce additional energy, power, electricity, they produce biomethane. But also there are several side products here that also are part of our feed for the food supply chains, okay? So we're talking about the GG, we're talking about brand. So a lot of things here, and as I say, we believe that the biofuels potential here to produce will help reforestation in Brazil and also will help supply of additional fuel. The last point that we bring here, the last question is that how does that compares in terms of cost competitiveness of the solutions? And given this design, we did simulations, in this case on the biodiesel side, and for that we used a combination, a blend, that's B24, that's currently already used, okay? And that shows that you have the penalties that you described. It shows that the biodiesel in Brazil, though it's more expensive in the beginning, it can be competitive in 2030. Moving forward, when the regulation gets more stringent, you get 6% difference, okay? So important sign that we have here that this is a competitive situation. It's a competitive also on the ports like Singapore or Rotterdam that are important ports for that, okay? So they're below the threshold of 390 that we mentioned before. The other aspect here for the ethanol, I think is a similar story with different components here, because the ethanol is low emissions, it can generate the surplus units, okay? So although it's more expensive, now if you see the blue side here, the surplus units, they work just like a credit, okay? So you could have a credit on that, and they also they make it more competitive, almost $7 different per unit of energy that you have there, okay? So this is something that in 2030 is already competitive, 2035 also very important. So in both aspects, we believe that there is also a strong competitiveness in all the sides. So basically now we see here a good design of a framework, the potential that the current value chains already structured can take advantage of that. We see the potential of Brazil, the role of Brazil in terms of the international trade and use of bunker fuels, and also the relative competitiveness that you see on that, using a vicious and taking a virtuous circle for investment in the recover or degrade the land. Okay, so I think this is with important side benefits. What is missing here? What we need to believe on that? Okay. First, I think the most important one, this regulated will have a final voting for this regulation. I have a final voting for consolidation just in early October. Okay, so very important vote to make this pathway real. Going to be happening here. There is an important discussion on carbon intensity standards. Everything here is based on the carbon intensity standards, and there are very relevant conversations around improving the way we define carbon standards and taking the carbon standards, the carbon accounting, to the product level. Okay, so this is something very important here that we have on this side. And also, everything here depends on the mechanism that I was describing. Okay, so this is very important how they are, how these incentives are well defined. Besides incentives, you need also compliance, you need the enforcement of what you have there, with something very, very relevant, very important. And also for the technology to advance, particularly because you need more engines on the ships that can use methanol and that are compatible also with ethanol. Okay. So these are the four elements we have here. What is the bottom line? What's the important thing we see? We believe that there is a potential for Brazil to supply about 15% of the global demand of fuels in a very sustainable way. Okay, so this is something very relevant that to discuss here. Within that, we have 25 million hectares of land recovered. We reduce about more than 10% of the emissions of the sector, and also can attract about $100 billion of investments in this value chain. Okay. So far, it's a very interesting stories. No? I'd like to close in here with this. This report is available for you to download that. No? So as we do that in every year. I think I close here with a word from Milor Fernandes, which is an intellectual in Brazil, a humorist, but he says, livre pensar e só pensar. Free thinking is all about thinking that we have here. And I think it's important like that when we discuss with the teams here of the Brazil Climate Summit, what are the critical topics, it's very important to bring to the table how we have the opportunities, how to make that tangible. So having said that, thanks a lot again. Thanks for your attention. Hope you enjoy this conference here.